The next section for TA southbounders is the town of Twizel to the town of Wanaka. Again, part of my pronunciation there. It is 88.2 miles, and this section itself has quite a lot of logistical things to handle. It's the full flavor of New Zealand South Island for you, so let's get into it. So, when you leave the town of Twizel, you start on this kind of pseudo 2-track bike path, kind of walking path, kind of the same flavor as when you had left Lake Tekapo to get to Twizel. And it continues on. There is a sharp junction here. I filmed this piece just to show you the signs hidden, so be aware in the first 3 miles you cross this dammed area, and then you have a very sharp junction off, so be prepared for that. And it is very exposed along here. I kept this scene super long because this sign just very much amuses me. It's mostly for boaters. It's not really advertising to the quote-unquote TA hikers that are hiking it. It's advertising more to the people that are using this area as a recreational area. But I kept it super long because it just amused me quite a lot. So this type of track, it's very easy to hold a standard pace on. Like I said, that pseudo 2-track, single track, kind of bike path type flavor. You have these few kind of ascents and descents, but overall you're not climbing 1,000 feet, 2,000 feet. It's a few hundred feet here and there. It's by far mostly flat. Shade is a rarity along this section, so grab that patch of shade when you can. Would heavily recommend packing more water than less out of the town of Twizel because it is dry, very dry, as you can see here. Your first next feasible water source would be the Lake Oha. Again, part of my pronunciation. You'll see it here in a few scenes, and it is lake water, and again, it's personal preference there. I don't prefer drinking lake water, but it is there in a case of emergency. Here's the Lake Ohau, again, part of the pronunciation. You end up just running along the side of it for a few miles. Some places are more easily accessible than others to get to the water, so just pick your moments if you do need to get water from this lake. The elevation along it, it's actually a really nice lake walk. There's not a whole lot. You can mostly track like this that you can hold that pretty standard pace. It's not some of that lakeside walk that usually is quite chunky. Here's a place that you can access water. Beautiful willow tree. A lot of people go down here. It is off trail, and there's a beaten down path or a single track there that will lead you to that entrance to access water. So when you continue hiking on there, you end up passing this little shack, and I don't know if I kept it in here, but the shack is like a private cabin. It is not a TA hut. I think many hikers sometimes mistake any hut along the TA route for a TA hut. Be very polite, respectful, no camping there, and you can't stay in the hut either. It is a private hut. So this will signify, this memorial will signify the end of the lake walk, or the lake walk of that track section, and you'll end up hopping on a road, an actual road itself. And this road will lead you into a place called Middleton Camp. Right here, Middleton Campsite. Some hikers decide to stay here depending on their mileage that day. It's a basic service camp spot, flat spot to pitch, and you can have some water accessible from the lake. And they may have water, piped water in there. Again, double check me on that fact. If you decide to go past there, you have a little bit more road. It puts you junction onto the lake for a very brief moment, about anywhere from 1 mile to 2 miles, and then junctions you back to the road. And Sawyer's Creek Trail, this will signify the entrance of your official quote-unquote climb for the day. There's this little cabin, again, that I did not film right at the entrance there. Do your own research. We saw hikers camped in that yard, but again, do your own research there, so there may be camping there. And this is what I'm talking about with the climb. It starts off on a 2-track. It's kind of twisting and turning 2-track, but it's pretty well graded overall. You are gaining elevation, so your pace may take a hit. I kept this scene in here, the Freehold Creek Bridge, because this kind of signifies when the track itself starts changing flavor. You've been doing a lot of bike path walking, 2-track walking, mix and match of those for past few days at this point, and now you're getting back into quote-unquote track, or tramping, as they call it in New Zealand, and you are going straight up. This is a very steep climb. Expect it to take longer than you anticipate. There's not so many quote-unquote logistical hurdles in this climb. It's just extremely steep. There are portions that have more rock and more root that will hamper your pace, such as this, but overall it's kind of a just baseline climb that is steep. It's not that special New Zealand like surprise flavor that some of those climbs do have. No landslides in there, no washouts. It's just rock, root, but it's really beautiful through that forest. So as you get to the top of the climb, there are more camp spots. Right before you break tree line, this is where we're camped at right here. Tree line is like another 0.1 right here. So there's a lot of good camp spots right before you get up to this plateau land. And I kept these scenes in here because there's a spring. If you decide to camp in that tree line before the top there, about 0.1, and this is the spring. Excellent water source. There is a creek also in that tree line that you can access, but if you want that unfiltered, clear, cold spring water, it's right up top there, and you can run up and grab it and then go back to camp. So if you decide to camp there, you continue your climb the following morning. You have done the quote-unquote steepest part. You are still ascending ultimately, but that initial anywhere from mile to 2 miles first part of the ascent was the steepest part. Magpie's sitting right next to the spring. As I said, it's right in that after you break that tree line, so just check your maps. It is located on the map system if you want that spring water. The climb kind of fluctuates. It has micro moments that are a little bit steeper, but overall you're just gradually climbing and soaking those views. This is also the last cell service when you're overlooking that lake that you will have for a little bit of time, so if you need to get any messages out or do any work or life necessities, grab that piece of cell service while you're there. You don't get it back in here when you drop down that backside. So when you drop down this backside, you have a quote-unquote hurdle of this day, and this hurdle is called the Aruhua River. Again, part of my pronunciation. This river can flood, and you need to get over it before rains hit. This day for us when we were hiking, it was about to rain, so we were pushing hard to get to that river. This is not it. This is a feeder system that ultimately will lead you into the broader river valley. So your miles along the way towards the major river, Hawea River, is mostly this. It's kind of following this feeder creek / stream. It sometimes puts you on nice single track. Sometimes it puts you on this rocky fields as you see here. Your pace will fluctuate, even though it's quote-unquote mostly flat and descending. You're still not going at that 3 mile per hour, 3.5 mile per hour pace that quote-unquote normal track may give you. So once you get to these tabletop lands, it really signifies once you're breaking away from that feeder stream type mileage and getting into more marshy mileage or just more flooded mileage. It doesn't last forever. This flooded portion of track does only last for about a half mile to a mile, but it is slow going. So eventually you'll break free of this, you do a little climb, and then it drops you back into this big river floodplain or river plain. And I want to point out too, until you get to here, camping was very limited. Like I said, where we camped the prior night at tree line, from there until this open plain, there are a few spots, but overall camping is very limited just because of the moisture and the ground content itself. This is the river I was pointing at. We crossed exactly where the trail deposited us. Some people go upstream, some people go downstream. We decided to cross right where the trail put us there, and as you can see, it got about hip high. It wasn't necessarily super deep, but it was very quick moving water. I could see it if it got another 5 to 6 inches higher. It could be quote unquote dangerous in the aspect of you might lose a footing and go for more of a ride than you would prefer. Again, it wasn't super deep. It is just very quick water. So check your forecast, check the conditions before you hit that river. When you break through that river, you go straight up the bluff on the other side. Really short but sweet but steep climb. Very steep. I wish the camera could do it justice. This is another tabletop on the backside once you get to the top of that climb, and soak it in because you're going to go for another climb. So this is the next portion of trail, and you ultimately climb into a place called Martha Saddle. I kept this piece of film in here because we are on the wrong side. If you are on the right side of this creek where the quote-unquote official trail is, you are wrong. The trail is on the left side where it follows a 2-track, and I'm pointing you where there is an orange marker. It's very confusing. The trail's confused through here. You can get confused. The maps are confused. Be on this. Be on the 2-track. Keep that creek on your right side if you are a TA southbounder. TA northbounder, keep it on your left. So you'll start your initial ascent up to Martha Saddle, and it starts off very gradual. Hold a pretty standard pace on that. And you pass this hut. Again, it's a privatized hut, so do not stay there. And the last anywhere from mile to 2 miles to get to Martha Saddle proper is when the trail really starts getting steep. You had been able to hold that 2.5, 3 mile per hour pace up until kind of this moment. It got really steep. It is mostly 2-track. It's that pseudo 2-track single track that I've talked about in the past, but it is extremely steep. I'm going to keep saying that. Hopefully that message gets across. So just build that into your itinerary and your plans that it will take a little slower that last mile or two to get to the saddle proper. And once you get up to the saddle, this is it. There really is not great spots to camp. It was super cold, super windy, super wet for us. If it's a pleasant day, you could quote-unquote potentially cowboy camp up there. Comes down to your personal preference, personal opinion. You cannot fit up tents up there. unless you have the smallest tent in the world. It's just not enough flat ground. So if you're looking for that next camp spot, the first available spot is down that field right there that you saw, and you get into this tussock field. It's about another 2 miles from the top itself. I apologize, in that mile to 2 mile range. You can see the trail cut in on that climb right there. That's looking back towards Martha's Saddle that we descended. This day is a doozy. So we camped before Top Timaru Hut. Many hikers decided to push onto there. It was about 2-3 miles from where we camped. The track to get to Top Timaru from where we camped, pretty straightforward, pretty easy, hold a standard pace on it. And many hikers stay at this hut because they have a decision to make. They have a decision to make to take the low route or the high route from here. So really check your maps, check the forecast, be prepared, because both of these routes, in my opinion, are quite difficult, quite time consuming. It is going to be a slog. So, wonderful slog, but a slog. So we started on the high route and quickly decided that the high route was not for us. Again, my camera can't do it justice to how steep this stuff was, and we hit more pockets of washout in the first half mile than we would have preferred. So we ended up cutting back to the river track, and it's called the Timaru River track. And they call it a track, but there really is no trail through there. And I kept these scenes coming up here very long just to show you the full flavor of this river track. You are constantly going back and forth, back and forth, back and forth across the water. And while you're going across the water, it's very sediment filled. So it looks deeper in portions than it is. Use a trekking pole. It never really got past hip deep on us, and that was in select few moments. But you're constantly crossing this river. Again, you can't really see the bottom, and that might give people some pause. But just go slow. Take those steps that you're confident in. And ultimately the river average will be around that shin high mark. There are those pockets I mentioned that do get hip high, but there's nothing that goes past belly button high. And there are pinch points in this river. And these pinch points look like this in the form of landslide on one side, rock wall on the other. And when that happens, you just have to end up fording directly in the river. There's no river track on either side. You're just trying to hug as close to the rock bands as you can to make the river less. So after a few miles, you hit this, and you're like, oh, the river plane opened up. It's going to get easier. It will not. It's consistently difficult, consistently slow going. So even though there might be hope when you hit that first initial wide section, just be prepared for it to be consistently slow and difficult. And it just shows you kind of the vast flavor of it. You just pick and choose what is the best route for you. Sometimes you're on the side of the river, sometimes you're directly in the river, sometimes you cross to the other side of the river because there's a bank that goes on for 50 feet, and then you're instantly back across the river because there's a bank that goes for 50 feet over there. It's so dependent. By far one of Magpie and I's personal favorite sections of the trail. It was just fun overall. This river, though, a huge disclaimer, would not recommend doing it when it has been pouring for massive amounts of days. So halfway through the river section, you have to do a steep bushwhack up to get around a waterfall. The waterfall is located on the maps. There's a lot of comments, a lot of icons around it. You'll know where that is. It's about halfway through. You have to steeply bushwhack back up to the official trail that we're sitting on right here that I'm pointing at. And you just stay on that official trail for, you could potentially do it the rest of the way. It is the high water alternate, or you could drop back down to the river. We dropped back down to the river and we had more miles to go. So what I was also saying, cannot recommend enough not doing this if it's flooded. There are more pinch points in the second half of the river. The rock walls get steeper, the gullies get narrower, you're in the river far more often. It was raining on us, as you see here, and we felt like we were in a time crunch because we were scared that it was going to flood. So if it's been raining for days before, again, your own personal opinion here, preference, all I can do is give you information. I would rethink doing the river route, or yes, just do what makes you comfortable, be safe out there. And again, I kept a lot of scenes of the river in here just to show you that it does not get easy at any time. It consistently is just river, rock, river, rock, river, rock, constantly. So as you near the end, though, there's again an unmarked junction that you have to climb out of. It's another waterfall, and it signifies, hey, climb out of the river valley. Not marked, so you're just going to have to be on top of your maps and kind of know where that area is. No rhyme or reason here. This is the waterfall. very steep bushwhack up. It's very, very steep. It's going to take you a while. As you can see, Magpie's using all fours there to get up that cliffside. It's not necessarily sketchy. It will be slower going than you do anticipate. You connect back into the official trail. Pat yourself on the back. You finished that. That is by far one of the hardest but most cool sections of the TA. So you connect back into the official trail and you have a climb up to Stody's hut. Have I said steep yet this video? This first mile is very steep. One of the steeper climbs you've done ultimately in New Zealand, barring Wahoo Pass and the Richmond Range, is very steep. You're gaining thousands of feet of elevation in that first mile to 2 miles. So eventually it will plateau out. This kind of signifies the top. When you hit this viewpoint, it gets flat-ish until Stody's hut. There is water about 0.1 before Stody's hut, so fill up if you're planning on staying at the hut. That's the hut itself. Very old hut, Stody's hut is. Not many camping areas around there, but it is a hut that you can stay in. So if you go past the hut, track gets far easier because, as you see, it is 2-track. That's pseudo 2-track, single track I've mentioned before. You are still ultimately climbing, but 1, the grade itself is easier. 2, you're not gaining as much elevation so quickly. And eventually, it will put you to the very top of this hill called Breast Hill. This is the top here. That trig marked the very top, and by far one of the most gorgeous scenes we had seen. You can look down into the valleys of Lake Hawea as well as Wanaka, part of my pronunciation. So take your camera out, grab a photo, grab a video, just soak it in. This is absolutely gorgeous up here. By far one of the most scenic mountains that we had climbed on the TA. I kept these scenes super long just to show you just the full flavor of it. It's just gorgeous. So you can camp up there. Not great spots to camp. There are 3 potentials. We picked the flattest one and there were still a couple tussock bumps underneath us. The 2 other ones were even more tussock filled. You can't fit, I wouldn't say, more than 3 tents up there. Again, your own prerogative. If you want to try it, you can. It's just not going to be great camping. Most people push to the hut called Papriki Hut. We didn't because we thought that camp spot was awesome. But Papriki Hut is about a mile past the top of Breast Hill. And it is a big hut. Many hikers stay there. There is water accessible there. So either fill up water at that hut or fill up before Stody's hut, because going onward, it is dry for TA Southbounders. No natural water sources. So for TA Southbounder, if you're planning to camp at Breast Hill, fill up at Stody's. If you're planning to camp at Papriki Hut, they have water there, and fill up before the descent, because even though the descent on the elevation profile map looks smooth, looks steep, but looks smooth, it is not. This is where the micro ups and downs of New Zealand decide to come into play. As you can see, that ridge line, you follow it kind of towards the end there, and it is just straight up, straight down rock. So even though you're ultimately losing a lot of elevation, you are also doing these really steep micro ups and downs. So don't expect to go quick. You're going to be holding that mile-per-hour pace, 1.5 miles, maybe 2 miles if you're really running through it, but it is very slow until you get to the final switchbacks. Once you hit the switchbacks along this ridgeline, that's when your pace can really pick up, but it's a lot of rock like that as you see Magpie jump down. Can't stress that enough. We got super surprised by that. We thought we were just going to crush miles downhill, but TA had a different plan for us. These are the switchbacks. You have about, I think somebody said about 100 to get to the very bottom. Trail's really good through there. Cut in, nice secure footing. You can hold a pace once you hit the switchbacks. That signifies that you've broken out of that chunky rocky terrain. You'll connect into a road. This road will connect you into Gladstone Track. There's a park behind us that has a place that you can sit and eat lunch. But if you want to go into Lake Hawea, pardon the pronunciation, you continue along this track. And it's very well graded, not a whole lot of elevation. You can hold a very good pace on this. And the town of Lake Hawea, I use town lightly, has like one store. It's mostly a restaurant, and I would not rely on a resupply here. There are some accommodations. Again, do your own research here for the accommodations. I think there were 2 that you can either do camping, and then there was one like fancy motel. So if you go through Lake Hawea, you end up connecting into another river track. Again, it's more that flavor of that Lake Tekapo to Twizel type stuff. Very flat, bike path, gravel track, what have you. Hold a really good pace on this. Very exposed, so bring more water than you want to, unless you want to drink that kind of river canal type stuff. Again, it comes down to preference. I've said this before. I personally don't like drinking river water, but some people are completely fine with it, so use that water information as you will. Eventually, you'll connect into this river swing bridge, as you saw there. Beautiful bridge, and it deposits you, directly into a campground. A lot of campgrounds, very big campgrounds around here, around the town of Alberton. There's one before you hit that sign, and then there was one right on the other side. Also, a very famous bakery there that shuts down at 3 p.m. So if you're trying to get there, make sure you get there before 3 p.m. If you decided to push past the town of Alberton, again, use the town loosely, you start more of that river track, and it eventually leads you out towards Lake Wanaka proper. Here is like a feeder piece of the lake, and you do this long kind of U to get into the town. It's very roundabout. You could do a more direct route, but the trail's trying to put you on the scenic portions, and it is very scenic. More water than not. Again, cannot recommend that enough. Very hot and exposed when we went through there. I think Wanaka usually gets some of the hottest temperatures during the summertime in New Zealand. Please correct me if I'm wrong. There is one water fountain before the town, and then you're close to the town. Wanaka, full service town, full amenities, full restaurants. We stayed with, shout out Michelle, great trail angel friend that we met along the way. So we didn't really film the town proper, but full service tourist town. It is a little on the pricier side because of said touristing, but there's a good doggo to end the video and get ready for the next section.